Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the RePlay podcast. A bit of exciting and, for some, not so exciting news over the past week with um, Sony's the announcement that Sony Spider-Man has exited the MCU. Oh, again, depending on what side of the fence you fall, then this could be good or not so great news. I'm on the fence of the character, not either of these companies. What is best for the character going forward, and the character's development going forward. Um, for those of you who have not been following the story or not yet caught up, essentially, both Sony and Marvel/Disney were in renegotiations for the future projects for the character and the actor in some ways, Tom Holland. And essentially, the initial agreement was that Disney would receive 5% of the profits from the solo Spider-Man films, and the and Spider-Man would be able to appear in the MCU. And it's important to note that with that, the cost for all the solo Spider-Man films are billed. That's all Sony, right? And Disney, in and of itself, receives all profits from merchandising. So toys, everything is Disney's, right? And those two factors are very important in this discussion. And it's something that I find that a lot of outlets and persons discussing and having the conversation about these events, they somehow leave out, albeit an integral part of the negotiations, right? But do bear that in mind. Now, as it was leaked that Disney requested 50% of the profits from the solo Spider-Man films, and Sony rejected that offer. And of course, with that rejection, and fans were angry and upset, and there was a huge backlash against Sony. And listen, we don't know we don't know who exactly leaked this information. What we can assume is that whoever leaked it did that with the hopes of gaining some advantage in the negotiations. And take from it what you will. Look at the fan backlash and decide for yourselves who stands to benefit the most. So you take from that what you will. Um, but that aside, it raises something of another issue, which is essentially this reactionary place that we seem to be in when it comes to receiving information. And uh, fans and comic book fans and film fans are guilty of this more so than anyone else, because we'll just see a headline and they'll just run with it, or you'll see a story online and you'll post a story online just for clickbaits without having a grasp of what the full details are. And I mean, it's really unfortunate that we're at that place now. And as you saw with the information that was leaked initially, people came out in droves against Sony, believing that that Sony was at fault. And then they quickly found out that okay, maybe it's not Sony. Disney was asking for so much, having to do so little. But at the same time, when that happened, the backlash towards Disney was minimum. And it's interesting. I've had several conversations, and there are no saints here, right? Both Sony and Disney, I'm sure had a part to play in some way. But the argument that people have been making, they're just ridiculous. Is that okay? Sony Spider-Man should be in the MCU because they made $1 billion, and there's no Spider-Man without the MCU. And where were these people over the past 2 decades with Spider-Man content that were coming out post MCU? Again, while this Spider-Man earned $1 billion at the box office, the highest grossing Spider-Man film is still Spider-Man 2 domestically. The highest grossing domestically is still Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is the only Oscar-winning Spider-Man film. And it says something about the culture that we're in now, where we quickly forget how we got here, right? I mean, all these persons, we didn't just become fans of Spider-Man. At least maybe some of them did. That's my conclusion from some of their reactions, from the way in which they speak. We didn't just become fans of Spider-Man. We became fans of Spider-Man because of the Sam Raimi films and the animated series and everything, the comics and everything prior to that. the MCU did not make Spider-Man. It didn't make Spider-Man as popular as he is a character now. They just didn't. And again, I like that the character is a part of a bigger universe. So I understand fans who are apprehensive about him leaving, especially because he's now become such an integral part of the MCU and the story. But again, what is best for the character's growth going forward? Now, the Russo brothers have come out and said that, and given their thoughts on what's happening in some way, that they had to go to great length to get both studios on board with sharing this character. And they've long said that Spider-Man is one of their favorite characters, comic book characters, so they really wanted him in the universe, so they worked hard to get it done. And so they've said because they had to, because it was so difficult to get the character in the first place, it's not surprising to them that this happened, because it was never a sure thing to begin with. And I understand their point of view. I mean, and they know more than we do because they've been working this. They've spent years trying to get this character into the MCU, and they finally did it, and now he's not a part of it. So, but again, as they've said, they're not surprised. They're not surprised because these are two major studios, and all their contractual obligations and everything. There are a lot of moving parts that both I and yourself will not know about, or just currently will not until later on. We just don't know. We're not in the rooms when these negotiations are going on. We don't know all the people involved. So we cannot just come out and cast blame on one side or another one. We don't know all the details, right? So again, I understand people's disappointment with him leaving the MCU, but I prefer to remain optimistic on the character's future. And I mean, with that, Sony's chairman essentially said that door is closed for now, which does give us hope that something can be done. There's still hope for some other agreements to be made in the future. We never know. And in the works now, I mean, there's at the very least there's a third film that we do know of, that's being made. Whether that film is successful or not, I think we can say with certainty now that some of the hardcore fans who want the film to actually fail, I don't know why they would want the film to fail. If you legitimately want the Spider-Man film to fail, then you are not a Spider-Man fan. You're just not. You're not a fan of Spider-Man. You're a fan of the MCU. And I'll say that to anyone. If you want Sony's Spider-Man film to fail, then you are not a Spider-Man fan. You are a fan of the MCU. So, if the film does well, then people will argue that, okay, they made the right decision. If the film doesn't do well, then the argument is going to be, oh, they should have left it with Marvel. But listen, the decision is made. It's out of your hands. You have no control over it. It's been made. It's set. It's done. Deal with it. Move on. And I personally, I've said this before, while I have enjoyed the character in the MCU, he's somewhat of a departure from the Spider-Man that I know. I don't let that prevent me from enjoying the films, because sometimes change is good. Right? Sometimes change is good. The only thing that I took issue with this Spider-Man is essentially the Uncle Ben factor taking a back seat to the Tony Stark factor. Right? I've said this before in previous podcasts that removing Uncle Ben from the scenario is essentially removing Bruce Wayne's parents from Batman. That's the driving force. That's what motivates him to do what he does every night. And Uncle Ben has always been a driving force that motivates Peter to do what he does. But that has been substituted for Tony Stark, and that is what I do not. That's the one thing about the character that I don't like. Everything else, it's fun. It's witty. I like it, but it doesn't feel like Spider-Man to me personally. Again, that's just my opinion. To me personally. It's just a huge departure from what I've come to expect from the character himself. But I honestly, I wish Sony all the success, and don't sell them short. I mean, look, I've heard people talk about Disney should buy Sony because they want Spider-Man in the MCU, and it's just ridiculous, guys. Come on, just stop. All right, you know, not to say that it can't happen. It can happen. We never know. But Sony is much larger than Fox actually was, and Disney had to cut off an arm to purchase Fox, and they'd have to lose the other arm to actually purchase Sony. They may, who knows? It may be that they purchase them later on, somewhere down the line, a few years from now, just to get back. Well, I guess it's not just Spider-Man, but his Rogues Gallery and others as well. But at the same time, why would you want them to? The effects of a monopoly, trust me, will not benefit you in the future. Oftentimes we're so blinded about what we want now. I want this now. I want this now. Come on, we're not children. Disney becoming a monopoly as it is now, it's essentially just it already is one. And you will see those changes going forward. It's from the announcement coming out of D23, and you'll see some of the characters, Moon Knight and Blade, who are going to be, and they're going to be PG-13 because Disney wants those characters on their streaming service because they're popular, but PG-13 doesn't service those characters. And that's just a box that creators are going to have to check whenever they want to pitch something to Disney now, because they want to get on Disney's streaming service and do well. They're gonna be they can't write mature content because Disney will be like that. This will not work on our platform. You need to change it, and you will find that these creative minds will be limited in what materials they can present, because this one company is the main company that they have to go to actually get projects out there. So this will not benefit you in the long run. So do not hope for failure for other studios. Competition is good for you as a consumer. So I do wish Sony all the success. I mean, outside, I've said before that, okay, if it doesn't work out with the MCU, they've already introduced us to the animated Spider-Verse. Do the same live action. Right? Bringing Miles, bringing an older Peter. Do your own live action Spider-Verse. They've already announced Morbius, and that could be a good success. Venom is already cemented. We already have Carnage, somewhat introduced by the end of the film. So there's a nice setup there to expand on the Spider-Verse itself. So focus on that, and those are films that I think I would enjoy. Any Spider-Man fan would enjoy tremendously. I don't think any true Spider-Man fan would want Sony to actually fail. Outside of the films, I mean, I believe The Boys, that's on Amazon, that seems to be all the rage now. It seems to be doing very well. I saw people are talking about that's on Amazon, but The Boys is actually a Sony project, right? And so they're doing numerous projects that I am hopeful for, and any fan of Spider-Man or the whatever projects the studio puts out should want them to keep doing stuff like this, right? So I don't know, we'll see. One of the conversations I was having with a friend of mine was, what happened for negotiations to actually break down? Outside of the money is a part of it, but what the chairman said, what Sony's chairman actually said about Kevin Feige not having enough, having a lot on his plate and not enough time to deal with them directly because the X-Men are now on board, and he now has to figure out how to fit the X-Men into the MCU, and whatever the case might be, whatever they decide to do with the X-Men and Fantastic Four, which we know later on that's what they're going to do, because they and I don't know, based on his comments, it makes a bit of sense for Sony to depart, right? And I say this because, listen, the company will not do anything that will not benefit it directly. They're in the business of making money, much like Disney or any other studio, right? Now, in the initial agreement, I believe part of the reason why they agreed to share Spider-Man was to kind of bring the character back into the spotlight, right? and so they benefited from that in some ways, while not receiving any profits from his appearance in the MCU. It kind of revigorated the character in a way, and with that, Spider-Man was slowly becoming something of a replacement for Iron Man, for Tony Stark. And with the acquisition, with the Fox acquisition, I don't believe going forward Spider-Man would be a focus for Marvel or Kevin Feige. And if that is the case, then I can understand why Sony is hesitant to both renew the contract as well as renew it under the new terms that Disney was asking for. Because with the X-Men coming in, Spider-Man would essentially become I don't believe he would be pushed to the side essentially, but he would no longer be the core. He would no longer be the focus, and that would defeat the purpose of Sony loaning him to the MCU in the first place. So I understand their perspective. If Spider-Man is no longer a priority for you guys, then he's no longer going to be a focus. So what's the point? What's the point? Right? So I mean, it's something that we do have to consider. If it doesn't benefit the studio, then they have no reason to keep him there. And again, while fans are understandably upset because of what it would mean for the MCU, he will have to exit in some way. But again, I do believe he has to appear in at least 2 more films. So if that is the case, then they have some room to actually make his exit not so jarring to fans. I don't know how they do it. He disappears into another universe, or he dies, whatever the case might be. But they have some room to kind of have him exit the MCU without it feeling like he was just yanked out, right? And never appear. So I understand fans are disappointed for the MCU, but I'm optimistic for the Spider-Man character himself, right? And I said it before, I'll say it again. If you are a fan of Spider-Man, you will not want Spider-Man, whatever studio he is in, you will not want Spider-Man to fail if you are a true fan. Now, the next story on our list, of course, is unfortunately not so unfamiliar, right? And because it still concerns one of the 2 studios that we just discussed. Netflix announced, it wasn't even so much an announcement, to be honest, but some information came out that Netflix would be releasing. They were doing weekly releases for some of their content, which is essentially some reality TV shows, The Great British Bake Off and Rhythm and Flow, and headlines going crazy with it, like what is happening to Netflix? Is Netflix changing their business model to go from a binge model to weekly releases? And it brings back what I spoke about earlier on about this reaction culture that we're in now, where we just get a bit of information, right? It's like being an addict for information, right? And we just see that bit of information, and it's like, okay, this is fact. We know this to be fact, and this is what's going to happen. This is what's happening. And most of them didn't do any research. People came out in droves, and they were like, okay, well, that's it. I'm leaving Netflix. I'm done. And why would Netflix do this? And as someone who has Netflix myself, and I actually watch one of their shows that is aired weekly, because this is not something new. Netflix has been doing weekly content for a very long time, but that's not their core model. It's not. But for certain content, reality TV shows being one of them, and comedy specials being another. So for me, the Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj, hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right, but the Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj, one of the comedy shows on Netflix, is actually aired weekly, and this show is in its 4th season. It's in its 4th season. So this is not something that's new. Weekly releases is not something that's new to Netflix. and nothing for most of these articles that came out, none of them actually stated that. So the information was just left there, and fans somewhat understandably just reacted to it, and they were angry. I'm gonna cancel my Netflix. And I'm like, just calm down, find out more, read a bit more, find out some more information. And to their credit, some actually, some of the articles, some news outlets actually did say, okay, there are some properties on Netflix that have a weekly release, but the majority of them didn't, and they just posted the articles for clickbait and to get a reaction. And as I said before, it's sad that that is where we are now. That and most people don't read the article; we just see the headline and we run with it. But again, let me reiterate: this is not the first. This is not new. Netflix only does this for specific content that lends itself to having a weekly release. But the binge models are their core focus. Now, interestingly enough, Disney actually, I believe prior to that, Disney actually did announce at D23 that their content on Disney Plus would actually have a weekly release model as well. And it's just interesting to see the contrast between the two. When the Disney news broke, most people didn't have an issue with it. And the argument could be made that because Netflix Netflix initially announced a binge model, and then they would be making a drastic change to weekly, then that's cause for uproar. So I can understand that reaction. And because Disney Plus is new and they're saying off the bat that, okay, this is what we're doing, so fans were rightly, more appeased, if anything, right? But again, some of the comments were that, okay, Netflix is now copying Disney Plus because Disney Plus announced that a week before, and now they're doing a weekly release. And no, Netflix has been doing it for years. But and the reaction, the contrast and reaction between both is just phenomenal to see. And with some people even saying when Disney made that announcement that this was refreshing, for Disney to go back to a weekly release schedule, and it's not. Cable TV is still a thing. This is essentially, they are essentially introducing digital cable. That's what's happening. They're essentially introducing digital cable, and it's for me, from my perspective, it's a subscription trap, because the purpose of paying a subscription is being able to get what you want the moment you pay that subscription fee. What Disney is doing is trapping you into a contract where you are going to have to pay every month if you want to continue to see that series, and that defeats the whole purpose of a streaming platform. It defeats the whole purpose of a subscription-based streaming platform. So I don't know. We're going back. We're coming full circle, because we're going back to the days of cable. This is essentially cable. What Disney is offering is essentially cable. Now, if they announce that, okay, we're going to be doing the monthly, the binge model with some weekly releases, I would be fine. But I'm not going to pay a subscription fee for a service that I'm going to have to pay weekly just to see the end, how this series concludes. Not doing it. I'm sorry, not doing it. Because you're asking me to do it. That's cable. It's cable. You take out the word subscription and you're paying a monthly fee. You're just paying a monthly cable fee. Remove the word subscription out of it. Remove the word streaming, and essentially you have cable. Right? Just cable without the cable, but you're getting content and you're paying a monthly fee to get that content to see that content every week, one episode a week. You're essentially paying for cable. So for me, and I've said it before, that I was apprehensive about Disney Plus, mostly because they don't have a variety of content. They have Star Wars IP, they have the the Marvel Comics IP, but what happens? What about other content outside of comics and outside of Star Wars. While I enjoy both, I like having smaller, dramatic, smaller drama, smaller comedy, whatever the case might be, romantic comedies, whatever your interest is. I like to see unique properties outside of just comic books and Star Wars, and they have announced nothing like that. So they've not gotten me on board just yet, and this weekly release deters me even further because if I'm paying a subscription, I'm paying a subscription so that I have access to something immediately. That is the point of subscription service. If I have to wait weeks to see the conclusion, and weeks to months to see the conclusion of this, if I decided, okay, I'm gonna join Disney Plus because I want to watch The Mandalorian, right? But I can't watch The Mandalorian. I can only watch how many episodes it's up to at that point. If it's in the second week, I'm only going to be getting the second episode of The Mandalorian. I want to be able to watch the entirety of The Mandalorian. Now, some argument has been made that, okay, yes, we have one of the downsides to the binge model in itself is that you don't get time to actually absorb everything that you have learned, and it lends itself to having discussions, right? If you've watched reaction channels who discuss these contents, right? Weekly episodes, then there's a discussion and fans can talk about their predictions and what they enjoyed about this particular episode, what they want to see, and weekly releases lends itself to that, and I understand that, but at the same time, you can still do that with a binge model. If all 10 episodes of a particular series are available, then watch one episode at a time. If that's what you want to do, then watch one episode, discuss it with your friends. Watch the second episode, discuss it with your friends. You don't have to binge the entire thing. But again, it depends on what your preference is. I mean, some persons would much prefer to watch the thing in its entirety, discuss it, and discuss everything that they have seen. And I mean, again, it depends on your preference. But let's not pretend as though this model that Disney has chosen has been chosen for anything else other than retaining their subscribers. Right? That's it. It's just a trap to ensure that their subscriber base remains and they don't leave. And while, I mean, don't get me wrong, as a business tactic, it's brilliant. It works. But as a consumer, it's garbage. As a consumer, it's garbage, and you're attempting to manipulate your subscriber base so you can make your bottom line. So I don't know. It could be in the future. Who knows? Maybe Netflix will decide, okay, let me adopt this, but I hope not. And if Netflix does choose to go down that road, I will feel the same way about them that I do service now, because again, I can't emphasize it enough. When I pay a subscription fee, I would like to be able to have access to the things that I am paying for immediately. If you remove that, you remove the name subscription, you remove the term streaming, essentially we're just back to having cable, just a digital cable system. So that would be disappointing for me. Alright everyone, thanks again for tuning in to another edition of the RePlay podcast. Be sure to follow me over on Twitter at @studio_replay for discussion on this and other related topics, and I'll see you all next week.